So you are the proud owner of a Singer Featherweight. Now what? In this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to get up and sewing with your Featherweight. We're going to cover bobbin winding, threading the machine, maintenance of the machine, sewing, all the tips and tricks that I have learned over the years as I have restored so many of these machines. This little beauty right here is actually for sale in my shop right now, so you'll get the chance to see how a properly tuned and serviced Featherweight should look, sew, and sound. We have a lot to cover. It's going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. Now let's talk about your Featherweight and the case that it probably came with. This case for this Featherweight is one that has a top tray. So I'm going to show you how you would set up all of your accessories and extras in this tray when you store your Featherweight. Not all cases came with a top tray. Some of the cases were minus this, and then you had a separate place to store your accessories and your foot control, usually in the top of the lid. But I'll show you the layout of how to store your accessories in a case like this. I will point out that if you want to sort of do some cosmetic repair to your case, you can find handles for all the different types of handles that they had on these cases at the Featherweight shop. So if you decide you want to kind of fix up your case, you will find pretty much everything you need there. But let's get a closer look at where everything goes in this top tray if you have a case like that. So here we are. This is the tray that goes and sets in the top of the case for the Featherweight. This hole right here is where the spool pin sticks through. If we're looking down inside the front of our case, the bed extension will be folded up on this side. The machine's going to be down in the case and this is going to go on top. You can see there were 5 little places to stick your extra bobbins, and for most of us that is not enough, but at least we can hold 5 here. These little hooks here were where you clipped in the screwdrivers that came with the accessories. Now, the biggest puzzle is usually how to store your foot control that came with the machine. So this is an original foot control, and one of the options would be to lay it in the case like this and then sort of work the cord around so it's not in the way of the spool pin, and then this could go into the case like that, which is nice because you don't want this scratching up your machine. But there is another option. These little pouches, they're sold at the Featherweight shop. If you don't care to make one yourself, these are great for storing your foot control in. Then you can put that down in with the machine and then put this tray on top, and the foot control is not going to scratch the machine, and it's also not going to take up all the room in this tray. That's what I prefer to do. Also, I find I use the newer electronic style foot controls, and we'll talk more about these in a second, but these you can make work here, but truthfully, dealing with all this cord, the better option is to have a cute little pouch that makes you happy, whether you make it or whatever, to store your foot control in. If you choose to do that, now you have room for your accessories and your manual, and you can kind of lay them in however you want. Some people would store their accessories out of the box. So this is the box of accessories, the attachments, right in here. I personally don't like that. They rattle around. I'd rather keep them in the box. If you don't have a box for your accessories, you can buy just a box from the Featherweight shop as well. That way you can store them all together neatly, and you can see how they fit in here. So then you have room for thread, needles, whatever you want to store in here. It works really well. So let's look at how this fits in the top. So here's my foot control. I can just slide that down in, and I would zip it up, and it's not going to get in the way of the tray at all. And you can just shut it up. So that's kind of where things go. Now, I want to talk about when you remove your Featherweight from the case. When you are pulling the machine out, it's really important to just lift it straight out. Straight out. And when you put it back in, you'll notice down in the bottom of the case is a little ledge. The entire base of your featherweight needs to fit inside this portion, not up on the ledge. And when you're putting it in, you want to be extremely careful because here on the end is your little Bakelite receptacle. This gets broken a lot of times. You'll see the bottom portion is broken off. That's because somebody put it in, they weren't being careful. This hit the case and this broke. It doesn't make your machine so it won't work. It doesn't make it unsafe necessarily, but if you're trying to preserve that, always carefully lower your featherweight into the case. So there's just a few little tips for you on where things go. If you have the newer style case, if you will, that's when they stopped making the tray on top. You'll see on the side of the inside of the case, on the side will be a place for your attachments box to go in like this. And I think I already mentioned it, but in the top of the lid, there'll be a little clip where the foot control just slides on right to left. And then the cord kind of hangs down inside the box. So let's talk about a few more things before I show you how to thread up and actually sew with this. Now, besides having the featherweight, the next most important thing is having a foot control. And this is the original foot control that came with this machine. These work. There's nothing wrong with them, except sometimes they can go out of adjustment. Inside, the way this is built is very different than the newer electronic style foot control. Inside here, we have these little carbon stacks. When we press the button on the foot control, they compress. That's how we get power to run our machine. Just that process of pressing this button and compressing the carbon stacks will cause this foot control to heat up. So it's not uncommon for it to start to feel warm under your foot the longer that you sew. My issue with these is not that they cannot be made to function properly. They can, but they can go out of adjustment, which to fix, you have to disassemble the foot control. You have to take it apart and make some adjustments to the inside. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't want to have to stop and maybe do that every once in a while, it's just kind of a headache. Sometimes we just want to sew. We don't want to think about that. I also would never leave this plugged in and walk away or shut down for the night while my machine and my foot control were still plugged into the wall. It's just not a good idea. So what I like to tell all of my customers is keep this, even have it working properly, all of that. Keep it for, just the sake of the history of the machine. You have everything, it's complete. But invest in an electronic style foot control for your everyday sewing and use. This foot control works similar to the original without the carbon stacks. It's not going to get hot under your foot. It's reliable. You can still get all the variable speed sewing, maybe even more so than with the original style. So you can sew very, very slow or you can sew very fast. It plugs into the machine in the exact same way. I will link one of these foot controls down below. They have them at the Featherweight Shop and they have them on Amazon. So you can choose, I think the ones on Amazon right now as of today are around $25. So not a bad investment. This I wouldn't be as nervous to leave plugged in overnight. The other one I would. Storage, again, in a pouch. This will not clip onto the top of a case like some of the cases I was talking about that has a little bracket in the lid that you slide them right to left. This won't work. So you will definitely need a little pouch or something to put this in before you put it in the case with the machine. So just a tip, if you're new to featherweights, I highly recommend getting one of these for everyday use. Now let's look at our machine. So now we've taken the featherweight out of the case. You can gently fold down your bed extension like that. If this is floppy, I have some videos on what to do to tighten up this bed extension, but we're going to want to plug it in. So that means that we're getting our plug that goes into the receptacle on the end, whether you're using the original foot control or the electronic, it's the same. So let's spin this around and you'll see if you look here, the receptacle has sort of like a little bit of a smiley look right here. So the shape of the plug is shaped the same way. You just want to make sure that that smile is fitting into the plug right, and it just presses right into the receptacle like that. So then we can plug it in. So I've plugged it into the wall. Now to turn on your light, there's a little switch. You just click it, it's right over here. Now this one is one that I have just restored. I think I said that it is for sale in my shop right now. I've put an LED style light bulb in here. Again, you can find those at the Featherweight Shop. What I like about them is they're coated in a little bit of a silicone, so they have some grip, and it's just really easy to grip them because they push in and they turn clockwise to fit inside the socket and stay in. It's a bayonet style LED light. So that's how you turn the light on and off. If the light is off, that doesn't mean the machine is off. It will still run even if you have this off. So that's only for the light. Now, right here, this is our tension. And a properly set tension will sew for your piecing and quilting, usually between a 3 and a 4. I adjust mine for 3, but you can sew 3 or 4 and you'll get a great stitch for piecing. And then here we see our stitch length indicator plate. This is what tells us how many stitches we're getting per inch when we sew. So on a modern machine, sometimes that's done. It'll tell you the length of the stitch in millimeters. This number system here is to tell you how many stitches per inch. What is awesome about it is that once we set our stitch length, so let's say we're going to do all of our piecing at about an 8, we can take this little dial here and spin it. Once we set it at 8, until it stops, it's pressed up against the plate. And then when we go into reverse, which is done by swinging this up, we do a few back stitches and then we bring it back down. It comes back to 8 for us. Always lock in your stitch when you're sewing. If you don't, you'll have your stitch right until you go in reverse, and then you'll bump it all the way down to 6 stitches per inch and your stitches will be too long. So make sure you always lock it into the setting that you want. It's very easy. This should just spin easily back and forth for you to lock in whatever stitch length you're looking for. Here is our bobbin winder. Usually when we're sewing, this is up and away. This little metal tire here runs against the belt on your sewing machine. So when it's down, you'll see I'll press the foot control. That spins. When it's up and we're sewing, we don't want this spinning. We just pull it away and it doesn't spin. So that's what that is. I like to put this down when I'm not sewing. When I put it in the case, it goes down against the belt. But of course, if I'm not winding a bobbin and I'm sewing, it's pointing up and away. This is your spool pin. This is where you're going to put your spool of thread for sewing and for winding a bobbin. Now, I don't have an issue using the spool pins typically, but I have read and heard from other people that they prefer to use a thread stand. Something about this thread that they're using doesn't work with their machine and it tangles and stuff. So the Featherweight Shop sells several solutions. I'm just going to show you one. This is a plastic thread stand. It comes from the Featherweight Shop. It actually goes on your spool pin like this, and then your thread slides on. So the way that it's coming off the spool is slightly different than if the spool is vertical. And there are a couple little caps that you can use to hold your thread in place. Like I said, I hardly ever use these. but I can see why they might be necessary sometimes. So I would check out the Featherweight shop and find which thread stand is going to work best for you. I like this one. I've used it a couple times, but usually, like I said, it's just fine, just right on the spool pin on the machine. Make sure you have a little felt here. It helps with the bouncing. The spool of thread will sometimes bounce and make a clacking noise. So a little felt or a little doily. I know a lot of people like to crochet little doilies on here. That works too to cut back on sound. So if this is your first time taking your machine out of the case and checking it out, before you even plug it in, I would recommend turning the hand wheel just to make sure it spins freely. Hopefully you have purchased it from a reputable seller and the machine is fully functional without any issues. But when it comes to you for the first time, always just turn that hand wheel towards you, no needle in the machine, and just make sure that you are able to get full rotation all the way around with the hand wheel. Make sure nothing's stuck. You don't want to try sewing if the machine is bound up in some way. So why don't we go ahead and wind a bobbin and do a little bit of sewing, and then at the end we'll talk about maintenance. So I have my machine on and I'm ready to wind a bobbin. I'm going to set my spool of thread down onto the spool pin. We're going to take our thread and we're going to look right here, okay? The spool of thread's going to go from the spool to this first point on the machine. Then it's going to come down, and do you see this little thing right here? Now you may have a different bobbin winder tensioner than this one. Most common is this one. So you're going to take your thread and you're going to slide it up in between these two springy little discs, and I'll get an up close for you so you can see. So if you look, you should be able to see these two little discs right here. They're kind of springy. The thread goes sandwiched in between them like that. That puts a little bit of tension on the thread and keeps the bobbin from being loosely wound. We want a nice tight wind. Now these are the bobbins. You can find them at the Featherweight shop if you need some extra. They are the bobbins that go inside the Featherweight and the 301, and those are the only machines that these bobbins work in. But what we're going to do is, after we've made our first thread guide down to the tensioner and we've put the thread in there, we are going to take our thread and we're going to find a hole on the bobbin. Now, these have holes everywhere, but find a hole and poke it from the inside of the bobbin through to the outside like that. So do you see? I have it on the bobbin, it's coming up through the inside and it's coming out through the outside. Then we're going to push it onto the bobbin winder. So with the thread on, we're going to push it onto the bobbin winder like that. Now we can lower our bobbin winder like this all the way down so it's pressed up against the belt. And we have one more thing we want to do before we wind the bobbin. This is your stop motion knob. Normally it's turned all the way clockwise. That is for sewing. When you wind a bobbin, you want to hold the hand wheel like this. Hold this part still. You don't want this to turn. Grab just this knob and turn it left counterclockwise until it stops. All that is doing is it's making it so the needle bar is not going to move up and down while you're winding your bobbin. If you forget to do this step and you wind your bobbin without doing this, don't panic. You're not going to hurt your machine. The thought behind it was you're not running parts that don't need to be moving unnecessarily. Whatever the case may be, it is good practice though to turn this all the way to the left as far as it will go before you start to wind your bobbin. Now for the next part, we're going to actually wind the bobbin. So make sure you have a pair of scissors or thread snips handy. So I like to hold on to this thread tail here. In fact, this one's so long, it might get caught where I don't want it. So I'm going to hold on to this thread tail. I'm going to make sure the bobbin's all the way on this little pin here. And I'm just going to start pressing the foot control. And we're going to watch this wind. Now, as I'm winding it, it's okay to go ahead and trim this now. As I'm winding it, you can see how evenly this bobbin is filling. You should see your thread go left to right, left to right. If yours doesn't and it's only winding on one side, I have videos for that on my Featherweight Restoration series. But let's go ahead and finish getting a little bit more thread on this. If I turn it back, you'll see that moves. The bobbin's still winding. If I turn it all the way, that doesn't move. Now, if yours still moves a little bit, don't panic. Sometimes they just do. And usually if you lower the presser foot, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, but there's a little lever back here. Lower the presser foot. It definitely won't move when you do it that way. So we have enough thread here. Let's snip this, pull this out, and let's look at our bobbin. So we have our bobbin, which has been wound. Here is our bobbin case, okay? Right under here is the bobbin case. Do you see this little lever? You just pull the lever out and pull the bobbin case out. This is your hook assembly. This is your bobbin case for your machine. Do not pull on this hard. Do not pull on this lever hard. They will snap easily. You should be able to easily pull this off and then push it back on. If it feels stuck, be very gentle. But here, if we look at the inside of the bobbin case, I want you to look and see inside the bobbin case, there is this little cutout. So the way I'm holding it like this. The lever's pointing this way. If I flip it around and I'm looking, I can see this little cutout right here. When I set my bobbin in, what I want you to think about is putting the bobbin in and having the thread winding on the bobbin in the opposite direction of that cutout. So that means that the thread on the bobbin, when I'm putting it down into the bobbin case, is winding counterclockwise. Do you see that? That's going counterclockwise. That's how I'm going to set it down into the bobbin case. And then I'm going to take that little thread tail and I'm going to pull it so that it goes into that little groove. And I'm just holding my finger on the bobbin so it doesn't spin. And I'm going to pull it so that it goes under that little spring right there. Okay? And then give it a little tug. You can see the bobbin is spinning. That is how it's supposed to go. If you have the bobbin turned the wrong way, your machine will not sew properly for you. So if you're experiencing some funny stitches, make sure you put the bobbin in the bobbin case properly. Now we're just going to pull this little lever out gently and we're going to pop it back on. And just make sure you get all the little hooks or the little holes lined up and it pops into place. Make sure it's fully on. Now we have the bobbin inserted into the bobbin case. It's on the machine. We can thread up the machine. Now, a lot of people ask me what type of needles to use with their machine. I use Schmetz. Is that how you say it? This is the brand I use. I've used them since I started sewing when I was 10 years old. I do not have any issues with them. They work great. I like that I can get different sizes, including the ones for jeans or denim, the Microtex ones. So if you're sewing with a knit, you want to change out your kind of needle. What I'm going to be using for this demonstration is a standard needle, the 80-12 size. I find it works great for a beginner who's going to sew your average weight cottons. And even if you get up a couple layers or more, you typically will be fine. Just remember, you should be changing your needle at least every project. And if it's a big project, you should be changing it more often than that. Buy them, in big quantities and I know we all want to conserve and save money, but on your needles, saving money on your needles and using one that is dull or maybe damaged is not helpful to you or to your sewing machine or to your project. So these are the ones I recommend. So we're going to put a needle in. So if we look at our needles, we can see if you spin it around, you will notice that there is a flat side to the needle. If you look at your needle plate, that's this part right here, there's also a flat edge, okay? The flat side of the needle is just like this flat edge here. It's pointing in the same direction. So that's your reminder. The flat side of the needle goes facing out. Now we have a needle clamp here, and I don't think I told you when you're done winding your bobbin, you want to turn that stop motion knob all the way back to the right clockwise until it stops. So your needle bar will move again. So we want to make sure that this little part right here is backed out. So you spin it towards you to back it out and make room for the needle. I like to raise my needle bar up so I have plenty of clearance, so I'll take it as high as it goes. Now, another thing is you will hear people tell you only turn the hand wheel on your machine towards you. That is true when you're sewing. If there is no fabric in the machine, no thread in the machine, it's not going to hurt it to turn it away from you. You just do not want to be in the habit of turning it away from you while you're sewing, or you'll get a big nasty mess. If you turn it away from you while there's nothing in the machine, there's no project, it will do nothing. It will not hurt your machine. So that's why I was turning it away from me, and some people say don't ever do that. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, so the needle bar is in the highest position. I'm going to turn my needle so that the flat spot is facing this way, and I'm just going to slide it up in here. And you may have to kind of tip your machine up for the first time so you get an idea of where the hole is that the needle's supposed to go. Push it up, make sure it's up all the way, and then turn this little knob away from you to tighten it down. Don't twist this so hard you break it, but you do want to make sure that you have tightened it enough, because it's a sad day when you're sewing and your needle comes loose because you didn't tighten this all the way. So now I'm just double checking. There is, I don't know if you can see it, but there is just the smallest of gap here that you should be able to see your flat spot to make sure you got it in correctly. So the needle is in with the flat spot pointing to the left. We can thread this one up. So we're still going to use this thread guide here on top first. We're going to make sure that our presser foot is up when we do this. So right here, this lever is how we raise and lower our presser foot. You always want it up because that is making it so our tension discs are going to be loose and relaxed, and we can get the thread between them. So it's going through this first thread guide. Presser foot is up. We're going to take the thread. I like to hold one end of it, and we're going to slide it along this little part right here. That's going to guide it right in between both tension discs. Pay attention. You do not want it behind them, which you can do that. Like right now, I just slid it behind both tension discs, but I always kind of look down, use this metal piece here to kind of guide it, and it goes right in between. Now, while I'm still holding the thread up top here, I'm going to keep tension on the thread, and I'm going to pull it. Oop, it's stuck under my machine. This is a little bit of a long thread. Okay, so I'm holding it up top here. I'm going to pull it up, and you're going to see this little spring it's catching now? I'm going to pull it, pull it, pull it until I hear that click. And now watch when this relaxes. Hopefully my hand wasn't in the way. Do you see how this thread is kind of behind this little hook right here? That's what we want. And if I hold this thread here so it doesn't move, you can see it makes the spring move. But that's what we want. Now, next, keep all the threads behind this little arm, by the way. We're gonna put the thread behind that little arm there. Here we go. And once it's behind this little arm, we're going to poke it through. This is your thread take-up lever. If you ever hear somebody talk about your thread take-up lever, this right here is your thread take-up lever. So we're going to put it through the thread take-up lever. So it's through this guide. between both tension discs, and we can make that happen because our foot is up. We've pulled it up until the spring came up all the way and the thread caught behind this little part here. We tucked the thread behind this thread guide, and now we've put it through the thread take up. Just going to hold the thread with one hand here, and I'm going to pop it. It should slide right behind this little thread guide right here, and you go from back to front. There, it's in place. And then we have 2 more spots. And you want to make sure that your needle is up so you can reach the eye of the needle, but you're going to see there's a little thread guide right here on the bottom. Tuck it behind that one. And then there's one more right up at the top of the needle. Tuck it behind that one as well. There we go. Now, to thread the needle, you're going to thread it from right to left. This is another thing. If you do this wrong, your machine will not sew properly. So, there we go. I think it's in. Yes. Grab that fast before it comes undone. And now our machine is threaded. So, before we make our first stitch, even though we have our bobbin in, let's lower our foot, and you're going to turn, grab your thread, just kind of hold it back this way if you want. Turn the hand wheel slowly, let it come down and back up, and you'll feel there's a little bit of resistance here. It's because it's grabbed the lower thread. You can see I just pulled it up, and we're going to pull that out. I'll raise the foot, pull all of that behind. I'm going to snip off some of this extra length here. That's ready to sew. So let me show you how we do that. So I'm going to try to keep everything in view for you so you can see. So when we are ready to sew, our foot goes up. Some of you may have a needle plate with seam guides, some of you may not. You can buy a little seam guide attachment that attaches here on the bed, and then you can kind of set it where you want it, and that helps you guide your seams. There are many ways to get the right sized seam allowance that you're looking for your featherweights. Just check them out, you'll find them. We're going to put our fabric under and lower our foot. Now I'm going to go ahead and bump this down to the 6 stitches per inch. So I've just rolled this all the way back. I've moved the lever all the way down to 6 per inch, and it is okay for me to go ahead and press my foot control. And you'll hear that thread clunk around, and maybe that bothers some people. But here we go. I just want you to see. This is 6 stitches per inch. So what that means is that this is a good gathering thread length. So if you're doing ruffles or gathers, now we can pull the lower thread. The bottom thread is the one you pull when you're doing the gathers. And look, we're making a ruffle, but we're not making ruffles today. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that out. Set that aside. So let's look at if we were sewing just a standard seam. And let's do a little test here. I want you to see something. So I'm going to make this somewhere between 8 and 10 stitches per inch. Let me know, what do you like for piecing? Do you do 8, 10, 12? What do you pick? I'm going to go ahead and lock that down. So let's do something. We're going to sew a seam with this. We're going to back stitch as well, but this is the standard foot that came with the Featherweight. What happens if we use the edge of the foot as our seam guide? So just lowering it, getting the edge aligned with the edge here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing, and then I'm going to back tack to lock in my seam, and then I'm going to move this back down. So hopefully my hands don't get in the way too much. So let's do a stitch, pressing the foot control, reverse, and back down, and it stopped me where I wanted it to. And let's just sew this seam. So I'm pretty much going along the edge here. I think I am. Getting around the camera is not. All right, let's check this out. Raise the needle up all the way, lift the foot, pull it away, trim the thread. Let's measure how big that seam is. So I'm going to use one of these little measuring gauges. You can find them on Amazon. You used to be able to find them at Joann's before they closed, but I'll link one below if I can find one for you. I just want you to see when you use the edge of the foot for your seam, it's only going to give you 1/8 of an inch. It's not a 1/4 inch seam, which is what most quilters are looking for. So just so you know, you'll need to find a way to get that 1/4 inch seam, and the Featherweight Shop will have some tools for you. So that's pretty much it. It's a very straightforward, straight stitch machine, okay? If you need your tension tightened for whatever reason, when you go to a higher number, the tension is tighter. If you want to loosen it for whatever reason, a lower number is a looser stitch. You have this too loose, you might get a few problems on the underside of your fabric. So let's just sew a little bit more. Foot's down. Let's do a real fine stitch so you can see how that looks. Look, and see, I didn't pull my thread away here. I didn't tuck it behind the foot, so it might get caught up in the seam. We'll see. This machine is really awesome. I can't believe how great she turned out. Turn this towards me. Cut it. And there you go. That's the real fine, tiny stitch. So that's basically it. That's how you use your featherweight. It's only a straight stitch, so you can adjust the stitch length and you can go in reverse, but that's about it. Your other adjustment would be tension. Now, I want to point out you can actually buy an attachment that will cover the feed dogs for you. And so you could use this for free motion sewing or quilting and darning. Singer made that attachment. Finding the original is hard. I have one, but you can buy reproductions from the Featherweight Shop as well. So there are also a lot of different attachments for this. Feet that do different things. You can buy a zigzag attachment. You can buy a buttonholer to go with your machine. You're not just limited to a straight stitch. So we've talked about the kind of needle to use. At the beginning, I told you about the light bulb. You can replace the light bulb with an LED, which is a lot brighter than the original bulbs. Let's talk about the belt for a minute. If you just got your featherweight, it's new to you, check the belt. The Featherweight Shop sells replacements. They're called their super belts, I believe. They're like a V belt. They work great. I love them. They're what I use when I replace the belt on a featherweight. It's not hard. I have a video on how to remove the belt and then how to put it back on. Very, very simple. So let's talk about some general maintenance that you're going to need to do. So for maintenance on your machine, you are going to need grease. This goes on the gears and in the grease ports on your motor, which I will show you all of that. This is So Retro grease. It is sold by the Featherweight Shop and it is the only one that I recommend. What is special about it is that it is formulated to work with the temperature that the motor might reach and the gears might reach as you're running the machine. It's not going to thin out. It's going to stay the right consistency even if it warms up. So I recommend this. Plus the little spout here, take this cap off, makes it very handy to apply. So one tube should last you a very long time. Can you use the old grease that came with your machine and the little old Singer tubes? I guess you could. I probably wouldn't, but you could. But this is really what you want to get. For the oil, the same brand, So Retro, the Featherweight Shop also sells oil, and it comes in a little bottle like this one, but it has their label. I use a lot of this, so I just refill this bottle. But the needle nose spout is going to help you get where you need to go. And that's where I'm going to show you first. I'm going to show you all the places you want to oil your machine. If it's new to you, I would probably do this before I ever start sewing with it. So we're going to go top down for oil points. So starting at the top, we have 2 holes on the top of the machine. Oil goes down in these, couple drops here, couple drops on that hole. Also on your bobbin winder, you may not have to do it as often, but there's a little hole on your bobbin winder. A drop of oil in there will keep the bobbin winder spinning nice and free for you. There's also a place you need to oil inside the top, so you'll need a screwdriver, and you can just loosen the lid and it swings out of the way for you. In the top, you're going to oil right here in this hole, and you're also going to put a drop of oil. I like to put it on each side of this cam here. This is your feed fork. Just put a drop and a drop, or just a big drop right in the center. That's where the oil goes in the top. Now we're going to open this back up again for applying grease later. So what I'm going to do is just totally take this off so it's not clanking around on us. There we go. Now there's another hole that you can use to oil part of the thread take-up system. It's right here. You can put a drop of oil in there. I like to oil it from inside the nose. I can access it there as well. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move to the nose. So to get to everything you need to oil inside the nose, you're going to remove this little nose plate here. This just turns out counterclockwise. Set it down somewhere and then slide this past the thread take-up lever, and it just slides off, and you can see inside the nose of your machine. So where do we oil here? Lots of places, but usually if you feel like your machine is starting to sound a little bit noisy, it's because you need to add oil, and you'll start to get a feel for when it's time to oil your machine. So where are our oiling points? We'll see if we can kind of work top down here. If you look inside the machine, right here, there is a hole up top. So I like to put a little bit of oil there. That's where the hole here on top would reach for you if you didn't want to take the nose plate off to oil that spot. But you need to oil all the rest, so why not just oil it from the inside? So that's our first place. Then if we start looking, I can see if I can show you this. Here on the thread take-up is a little hole. A drop of oil goes there. And then if we turn this, now you should be able to see there's a hole right here. A drop of oil goes right in here on the thread take-up. And then further back, let me see if I can get the light for you. Further back here is another hole that gets a drop of oil. There's also a hole back in here on the bottom part of the thread take-up. So right there is a little hole you want to add oil to. And these should all be in your manual. So we turn this, and the last thing that we want to do is just to add a drop of oil here where the presser bar goes through this part of the machine, and here, and then down here where the needle bar is going down through the machine. And then I like to put some oil on the needle bar and then just run it, give it a chance to get up into this bushing here. I'm sorry if I'm moving the camera too much. Or you can run a little bit of oil along the inside of the edge of this bushing here and turn the hand wheel to get that oil so it's oiling inside this bushing. So those are all the places that you want to oil inside the nose. Now, let's talk about the hook itself. If you look at your hook here, I have the bobbin case out of the machine. It's not in the machine. Do you see the little teeth? Yours might look different. The teeth design is different on different bobbin case bases, but just like a little bit of oil along that race, sometimes it will get noisy because that needs to be oiled. So, and once you do this, just run some test stitches before you start sewing on your project in case you over oiled. That way you won't get oil on your thread and on your sewing project. But that's going to need oil. Now the rest of the places that we oil are on the bottom side of the machine. In order to find them, we have to remove the bottom cover. You guys can see how clean and shiny this machine is. She was so much fun to restore. And hopefully she has a new owner soon, but we're going to go ahead and look down here in the bottom. So what do we see? We see the gears that we're going to need to grease, but I want to show you where you're going to oil. You're going to oil here. There's a hole. That is for the hook shaft that's going through a bushing here. We want to keep that nice and oiled, and same over here is a place. Same kind of hole, drop of oil there. Then we have a little place right here and another hole. It might be a little bit hard to see, but it's right up there. That's going to get oil. Then we're going to oil these points here. There's 4. These are where your rock shafts centers go. These shafts pivot on these little metal pieces here. So put some oil there, over here on this side and this side. Then you can just run a little bit of oil here if you want. And way back in the back, it's kind of hard to see, but back here are 2 places that you can drop some oil, and hopefully you can see that. Those all need to be oiled as well. Now, before we get to the grease, we have one more place that we need to do our oiling. And that is here on the back of the machine. Do you see these 2 holes right here? That's why you want this little needle nose oiler, but drops of oil down in both of these holes. Just 1 or 2 drops is all it takes. And then you want to turn your hand wheel to make sure the oil is getting worked in everywhere that it needs to go. So starting at the top with the top gears, make sure you can see them here. We have this upper gear, and then down in there's a smaller lower gear that's meshing with this one. If you just pump a little bit of grease from your tube onto the gear itself, and I'm not really going to add much to this because it actually already has enough. I just restored this machine. It doesn't need any more grease. But you're going to run a little line of grease, turn the hand wheel, add a little bit more, turn the hand wheel, and do that until you went all the way around the entire upper gear. It will put grease onto the lower gear for you. If you just got your machine and there's just a bunch of old brown grease in there, use Q-tips. Clean off as much as you can. Don't be afraid to clean off as much as you can. And then apply new fresh grease. But Q-tips are a great way to get all the extra off in there. So that's how you grease the upper gears. Let's look at the bottom. For the bottom gears, it's the exact same idea. And you can see this light coating of grease that I have on the gears. It should look kind of yellow. That's all it takes. And you can just run it on the bigger gear, spin the hand wheel, and it will grease the smaller gear as you go. But if you get too much, it's going to sling off just like it has here, but that's okay. You can just come in with a Q-tip and clean off that extra stuff. You can see it's here. That's just because I added more than it needed and it just flung all around the inside of the machine, but you can take that off. So you need to do that periodically, okay? You do not need to grease your gears every time you oil your machine. You should be oiling your machine. If you're sewing for more than 4 to 8 hours, you need to go ahead and oil it. Greasing it, that maintenance is just done every so often as needed. Now let me show you how you fill the grease ports on the motor. The motor has 2 grease ports, one here and one here. And all you do is, that's another great thing about this syringe, you just stick it down into the grease port and you pump in a little bit of grease till you start to see it come out. Just very carefully grab a Q-tip, clean off that extra. You don't want to get oil or grease on your belt. It will cause issues, so definitely keep it off of the belt. But just fill up those ports from time to time. If you can look down in there and you don't see any grease, top it off. So now we can put all the covers back on. So we'll just pop on this bottom cover here. Should have a little felt that goes on first. We'll just pop that on and tighten that down. And we can put our top cover back on because we got to all of the oil and grease points there. There we go. Last but not least, the nose plate, and that's just this little thumb screw. Something else that I notice sometimes when a machine comes to me is that these 2 thumb screws have been switched out. The meaning they're in the wrong place. The smaller one goes for the faceplate, the larger one goes for the foot, just in case you're ever confused. So if you just got a featherweight and it's new to you, hopefully that was a little bit helpful to get you up and running. One more pro tip that I just want to point out. If you're having issues sewing and you think you've threaded your machine right, you've done everything right, check your needle plate. What I want you to look at is, here's our bobbin case. Do you see this little thing right here? It's called a positioning finger. It needs to be between this space and this space on your machine. If it's cocked to this side, this little finger, if it's over here or over here, your machine's never going to sew properly for you. The way that you fix that is really simple. There are 2 screws in the front and back of your needle plate. You just loosen them. You don't even have to take them out all the way. Loosen them, kind of bump your needle plate up a little bit, and you can move that little finger over in between those 2 spaces so it's positioned right, and then tighten those screws back down. Sometimes that happens. People will remove the needle plate to get lint out from underneath the feed dogs, and then when they go to put it back, they forget that finger needs to be in the right position. So something to check for if you're not getting a satisfactory stitch. But anyway, here we go. This is a lovely 1948 featherweight. It comes with all the things that you see here. It's for sale in my shop, but hopefully that just helped you get started. I'd love to hear from you if you are new to sewing especially, and you'd like to know more about your featherweight. I have a full restoration series that tells you how to take this completely apart, clean everything, and put it back together. That might be helpful for you. Maybe you don't do the whole process, but you focus on the area that you think is giving you trouble or that is especially dirty and you want to clean it. I can show you how to disassemble and reassemble your tension if you think maybe something's wrong with your tension assembly. There's so much you can learn in that series. I highly recommend it. Other than that, I thank you for watching. Go check her out in my shop. I'm sure she won't be there long, and I'll see you guys again really soon. Bye.